Hi all. In this lecture, we will be discussing something about nucleon-nucleon interaction and how a deuteron can be used to learn something about nucleon-nucleon interaction. If we are to understand nuclear forces, we need to consider nucleons interacting with each other, and we get a lot of information from scattering experiments. About nuclear forces, we have the following information obtained from various experiments. We can see that it is stronger than the Coulomb force at short distances, and it can overcome the repulsion between protons within the nucleus. And that's why the nucleus stays as a single unit. Now, if the nucleons are relatively far apart, beyond a particular range, nuclear forces are not operational, and there your Coulombic force comes into play. Now, there are some particles which are not affected by nuclear forces, something like electrons. They don't feel nuclear forces at all. And we also have seen that nucleon-nucleon force is charge independent. That is the force acting between a proton and proton, a proton and neutron, as well as a neutron and neutron are pretty much the same. So it doesn't depend on what charge the particle carries. And the force is different when the spins of nucleons involved in the interaction are parallel to each other or they are anti-parallel. So nuclear forces are spin dependent. They are charge independent but spin dependent. And we also have something like nuclear forces, they become repulsive when nucleons come closer beyond a particular distance. So they are attractive in a particular distance regime. Beyond a particular distance, the nucleons do not interact via nuclear forces. And if nucleons come very close to each other, then nuclear forces are repulsive. So it's a peculiar type of force. And to understand more about nuclear forces and more about the energy states possible for nucleons, we consider the most simplest system available, which is nothing but a deuteron. If we consider a deuteron, it consists of a neutron and proton. It's 1h2, and it's the simplest bound system of nucleons available, and it's the best system that we can choose to study nucleon-nucleon interaction. Now, from various experiments, we know that the binding energy of deuteron is 2.225 MeV. So the binding energy per nucleon becomes, you divide this by 2 and you get this value, which is of course very small. When you compare with the uh, typical value for almost all nuclei, it's somewhere around 8 MeV. Binding energy per nucleon as per the binding energy per nucleon versus A curve, mass number curve, if you remember something like this, which we had seen in the previous lecture. You plot binding energy per nucleon versus mass number. You have a curve going something like this. Okay, so on an average, almost all nuclei fall in the approximately 8 MeV category, except for lightweight nuclei and extremely heavyweight nuclei. Almost all nuclei fall in and around the 8 MeV um, binding energy per nucleon category. So we see that deuteron is a very weakly bound system because the binding energy per nucleon is extremely small compared to the average of 8 MeV for almost all nuclei. So it's a weakly bound system. And from experiments, we also have obtained that R is approximately 2.1 femtometer. the radius of a deuteron happens to be like this. So, since it's a bound system, we can assume a potential well for the particles, and uh, suppose the approximate depth of the potential well is somewhere around 35 MeV, and we saw that deuteron is a bound system with a binding energy of approximately 2 MeV. So it's almost near the top of the well. So if you give this much amount of energy, it will just jump out of the well. So it's just bound. That's all. It's very close to the top of the well. Now, if you consider such a potential well, and if you solve for the um, energy eigenvalues by solving Schrodinger equation, you just consider two regions. You have a region within the well and outside the well. So R less than R and R greater than R. We have a potential of minus V naught for R less than R, and potential is 0 for R greater than R. Now the assumed potential is a central potential, and it depends only on small r. There's no theta phi dependence. YLM theta phi is a constant. So there's no theta phi dependence for the potential. It's a central potential, depends only on R. And we have a term involved in the radial part of the Schrodinger equation like L into L plus 1 by 2mr square h cross square, which happens to be 0 for L equal to 0 state, because the ground state is always evaluated by plugging in L equal to 0. And when you plug in L equal to 0, this term becomes 0. So your Schrodinger equation, after giving a substitution for the radial part as u of r by r, would become like this thing: minus h cross square by 2m d square u by dr square plus v of r u of r equal to e times u of r. Now we need to solve this equation. You have two different regions where the potential is different. In the region 1, you have minus V naught as the potential. So region 1 is given by R less than R, where V is minus V naught. You plug that in this equation, and you have something like this. Now rearranging the terms, you get d square u by dr square plus 2m by h cross square v0 plus e times u equal to 0. Now this entire term, you take it as k1 square. That is, your k1 is this term. And for a differential equation like this, the solution is oscillatory, and it is a sin k1r plus b cos k1r. Okay, that's the most general solution possible for such a differential equation. Now you go to region 2, which is r greater than r. There v is 0. So your Schrodinger equation becomes like this. And you just write the terms like this: d square u by dr square minus 2me by h cross square, because e is a negative term and this would be positive. So you write like this, and your differential equation becomes like this: d square u by dr square minus k2 square u equal to 0, where your k2 is root of minus 2m e by h cross. This term is real. Okay, this term is real because e is negative. So this term within the root will be a positive quantity. And the solution for such a differential equation is in terms of exponentials. So your u of r would be a linear combination like this: c e raised to minus k2r plus d e raised to plus k2r, or the other way around, no problem. You can write it as c e raised to k2r plus d e raised to minus k2r, and I have written like that. I have written my solution in the second part as c e raised to k2r plus d e raised to minus k2r. Okay, so at r equal to 0. Now our wave function is well behaved wave function. So uh, for r less than 0, wave function is 0. For r tends to infinity, there also your wave function is 0. So at r equal to 0, your psi is 0. So psi is 0 implies u is also 0. So the solution in region 1, the most general solution in region 1 which you obtained is a sine k1r plus b, sorry, b cos k1r. When you plug r equal to 0, your terms would be like this. This part is 0 and here it would be a sine 0 plus b cos 0. Cos 0 is 1. So you have an equation like this. But your LHS is 0. So everything on your RHS should be 0. So for that, the condition becomes like B should be 0 to ensure this equation is satisfied. So the solution in the first region turns out to be A sine K1R. You give it as equation 1. Now at R tends to infinity, your psi again goes to 0. So the solution in the second region, the most general solution is C e raised to k2r plus d e raised to minus k2r. Now when you put r tends to infinity and psi goes to 0, this would be 0 equal to c e raised to infinity plus d e raised to minus infinity. Now for this to be a finite quantity, this c has to be 0. So your solution in the second region would be like d e raised to minus k2r. Now you give this as equation 2. Now at the boundary, wave functions should be continuous. So u1 should be equal to u2 and the first derivatives should also be equal at the boundary. So when you write that at the boundary, what happens? u1 should be equal to u2. Now u1 was a sine kr, k1r and u2 was d e raised to minus k2r at r equal to capital R. When both are equal, the equation turns out to be like this. Now, if we take the derivatives of u1 and u2 and plug in the condition r equal to capital R, you get something like this. So, you have equation 3 and equation 4 at the boundary. Now, you divide 4 by 3 and you get something like this. Okay, so this is what is given here. K1 cot K1R equal to minus K2. Okay, now solving equation 4, 5 numerically, we get V0 is 35 MeV. Okay, now we know relations like this. You had substituted K1 as root of 2m into V0 plus C by h cross square. You obtained V0 just now. You know what is E and you know what is m and h cross square, everything you know. So from here you can evaluate K1 as approximately 0.9 femtometer inverse. Similarly, you have your K2 as K2 as sorry, your 1 by K2. Okay, K2 is this thing and you get 1 by K2 as 4.3 femtometer. Okay, we'll see why we have evaluated this thing. So psi1 is A sine K1R, right? We know that R is 2.1 femtometer. From various experiments, we know that R is 2.1 femtometer. And we just now obtained that K1 is zero point 0.9 femtometer inverse. So your sine K1R, the sine K1R is sine 0.9 into 2.1, which is sine 1.9, which is 0.95. Okay. Now, we know that the maximum value possible for sine theta is 1. And here it is sine k1r. So sine k1r is 1 when k1r is pi by 2, right? Or pi by 2 or 1.57. So your when your r is 1.744 femtometer, the maximum value for the wave function occurs, right? Sine becomes a maximum when the sine function becomes a maximum when r is 1.744 femtometer. Okay, so let's just look at the deuteron wave function. So you have this is your region 1, this is your region 2, and here you have your 2.1 femtometer boundary. This is your well region, and this is outside the well. And if you are just looking at the nature of wave function, the solution in the first region is a sine function. It becomes a maximum at 1.744 femtometer. And at 2.1 femtometer, what's the value? We just evaluated now. It's 0.95. So it's anyway less than this value, right? It's less than this value. So becomes a maximum at 1.744 and it starts decreasing. But at 2.1 femtometer, it reaches the boundary. And beyond 2.1 femtometer, it is region 2. In region 2, your wave function is not a sine function. It is a decaying exponential. Okay, so your u2 is d e raised to minus k2r, where my k2 can be evaluated using this expression. And I see that 1 by k2 is 4.3 femtometer. Now what is exactly 1 by k2? What is the distance 1 by k2? What does the distance 1 by k2 mean? 1 by k2 is the distance over which my wave function becomes 37% of maximum value. Okay, so the distance over which the maximum value depreciates to 37%, or the intensity of the wave function drops to 37% of its maximum value at this distance. So at 4.3 femtometer, which is somewhere here, my wave function becomes 37% of maximum value. And it slowly, gradually goes to 0. So the wave function falls to 0 only at extremely large distances. So if you see that, now what is it that you understand? When you say that the wave function is not zero outside the potential well, it implies my deuteron is present outside the well also. Now if you see the entire wave function, only a very small region is within the well. A large expanse of the wave function is outside the well. So it just tells us that the deuteron for most of the time is outside the well, or it is in an unbound state. And sometimes it is also present in the bound state. So it's a very weakly bound system. Most of this time, the proton and neutron within a deuteron do not interact via nuclear forces because they are outside the well, and they are pretty much an unbound system, but sometimes they are also interacting via nuclear forces. So it's like they are in constant motion. Sometimes they are outside the range of nuclear interaction, and sometimes they come in the proximity of nuclear interaction. Okay, so it's a very interesting system to study. It's a very weakly bound system, but it is a very important system too, because that is how exactly even life is surviving. Okay, so thank you all.